Hi guys, today I'll be taking a look at a linear switch designed for gaming, the Kailh Speed Silver. Let's get started. Now, the Kailh Speed Silver is a direct clone of the Cherry MX Speed Silver, although Kailh now has a newer version called the Kailh Box Speed Ultimate, which should be a better version of these. Now, pricing wise, these are $31 for 110 switches on Kailh, placing these in the budget range. And this is what they look like when disassembled. Feel free to pause the video. Now let's move on to the switch characteristics. On-center key presses are a mixed bag, with some switches being scratchier than others. Off-center key presses are substantially scratchier with very noticeable inconsistencies as well as light binding when pressed very slowly. Overall, these are below average and I wouldn't recommend them. 4 out of 10. Now, according to Kailh, these switches have an actuation force of 40 grams at 1.1 mm and a total travel of 3.5 mm. Now, in terms of the actual key feel, they feel slightly heavier than what the specs suggests. They feel anywhere from 45 to 50 grams, which surprised me given I was expecting them to just be as light as other speed switches. Additionally, these have weighting discrepancies where the weighting slightly varies from switch to switch, so that sometimes made them really irritating to use. Adding on to that, the actuation point also varies from switch to switch. It's not as noticeable compared to the weighting issues, but it is there and I really don't like that. Overall, these are very light switches with a weighting and actuation problem, which makes these very undesirable. It's honestly quite disappointing to see. 4 out of 10. Now, their sound signature is nothing special. It's clacky given my case and scratchy given they weren't designed very well. Overall, they aren't offensively horrendous, just below average. 4 out of 10. Now, take a listen and enjoy. Now, typing isn't what springs to mind when it comes to speed switches, and with these, there's a lot of downsides I need to mention. Firstly, these are very sensitive for typing. I made a lot of typos with them, and the fact that these have actuation discrepancies, which made that experience even more frustrating. Secondly, they have a very light weighting, and not only that, the weighting discrepancies are much more noticeable, which led to more typos and just general accidental key presses. And finally, to add to all that frustration, these are also very scratchy. Typing on a very light linear switch with weighting and actuation variations is not very comfortable. Overall, even with that said, they aren't absolutely horrible to type on, but they are clearly worse than average. 4 out of 10. Now, gaming. This is what they were designed for, so are they any good here? Well, just like with typing, I found these too sensitive and too light for my preferences. In fact, these were so sensitive that I often found myself accidentally actuating keys just by leaning on them. This was the case after even a week of use, so that's already not a good start. Additionally, their weighting and actuation point inconsistencies were noticeable in both fast and slow-paced games. Now, this didn't make a huge impact on my performance, but I'm just a casual gamer. So if I noticed it, I'm sure many more serious gamers will. Finally, don't forget that these are scratchy as well, and yes, that did not help in any way. However, that's the least important aspect about these switches, which should tell you something. Overall, it should be obvious by now that you should stay away from these. 4 out of 10. In conclusion, the only good thing about these switches is that they're cheap. Switches like the Gateron Pro V3 Silver or the Akko POM Silver are far better options, but this is a disappointment. The final score for this switch is 20 out of 50 or 40%, which is well below average and is one of the worst performing switches I've reviewed in a while. And that's the end of the review, and next time, if things go to plan, I'll be testing the box version of these. Anyway, until then, take care and goodbye.